In the quiet heart of a forgotten village, nestled between golden hills and long winding streams, there lived a girl whose name few outside the village knew, but whose heart would touch the world. Her name was Amara. She was an orphan. Both parents gone, her father, a kind-hearted fisherman, swept away by a sudden storm at sea. Her mother, taken by illness just a year later, and since then, the winds of life had pushed her around like a dry leaf in harmattan, fragile but never broken. Amara lived with her late mother's sister, a struggling widow with 5 children of her own. Life was hard. There were days Amara would go to bed with nothing but water in her belly and hope in her heart. Yet even in her poverty, she never stopped smiling. But more than anything, Amara had a dream to go back to school, to study and become a teacher. Not for fame, not for riches, but because she believed that knowledge was the only gift that could free her people from generations of suffering. Her classmates had moved on. Some had graduated, others had left the village. But Amara stayed behind, carrying her books like sacred scrolls, waiting for the day when her name would finally be on the school register again. That day came sooner than expected. One cloudy morning, as the sun fought to pierce through the gray veil of clouds, the village chief's wife arrived with a gift, an envelope wrapped in brown paper. It wasn't much, but inside was enough money to cover Amara's school fees for 1 term. Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched it to her chest. The village women had contributed. Even the market women, those who barely had enough to eat, pitched in. A miracle. A sign. The next morning, Amara dressed in her old, faded uniform, the same one she had worn years ago, and stepped outside. Her sandals were worn at the soles, but her spirit was as tall as the Iroko tree. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama, I'm going back to school." The village buzzed with joy as she walked past. Children waved. The old men at the palm wine hut nodded in respect. Everyone knew what this day meant, but fate has a strange way of testing the purity of one's soul as Amara walked along the dusty red road to town. Just past the big baobab tree, she saw him, a beggar, old, thin, with a long beard that had gone white like chalk dust. His clothes were tattered, and flies danced around his ankles. He sat beneath the tree, coughing, shivering, his eyes barely able to meet hers. He raised a hand weakly and whispered, "Please, help me, just something to eat. I haven't eaten in days, Amara stopped. Her heart trembled. She looked at the brown envelope in her hands, her school fees, her future. Then she looked back at the man whose ribs poked through his skin, like broken bones beneath old leather. She stepped closer. "Baba, do you have any family?" He shook his head. "No one left. They think I'm dead." Silence hung between them, thick and heavy, in that moment. A storm raged in Amara's heart. She thought about the years she had waited for this moment, about all the mornings she had watched her classmates pass by while she stayed home to fetch firewood, about the pain in her aunt's eyes when they had no food. But then she looked at the beggar again and saw something she couldn't ignore. He reminded her of her father, of the last time she had seen him. Soaked, coughing, reaching out for her before the sea swallowed him. Her lips quivered. Her fingers gripped the envelope tighter. And then, she did the unthinkable. She knelt beside the beggar, gently placed the envelope in his hand, and said, "Use this, Baba. Get food. Get rest. You matter too." The old man stared at her in disbelief. This is too much." "Why?" She smiled. "'Cause if I were in your shoes, I would want someone to care." He cried. She cried too. They sat together beneath that baobab tree. Two strangers tied by invisible threads of compassion and pain. Eventually, Amara stood, brushed the dust from her knees, and walked back toward the village. The joy was gone from her steps now. But in its place was peace until the whispers began. "How could you be so foolish?" her aunt screamed. "You gave up your school fees again," shouted the teacher. "You think the world runs on kindness alone?" The chief's wife snapped. Even her friends couldn't understand. "You'll never escape poverty with that kind of heart," one girl said. But Amara said nothing. She just sat on the old bench outside her hut, looking up at the stars that night, whispering to the heavens again, "Mama, I did what felt right." Little did she know, the man she had helped was no ordinary beggar. He had once worn suits, driven cars, and held power in high places. He had once lived in mansions. He had once been a father. And now, fate had spun its wheel and the universe was watching. The story had just begun. They called him the madman of the baobab tree. No one knew his real name. No one cared to ask. He had wandered into the village years ago, dirty and mumbling, eyes haunted by ghosts of a past only he remembered. Children threw stones at him. Adults ignored him. He was invisible. Except to one girl, Amara. The morning after she gave him her school fees, he was seen buying hot yam and beans at the market. The women stared in shock. "Isn't that the madman? Where did he get money from? Atiza, who gave him that fine wrapper? He even smells clean now." Some said he must have robbed someone. Others said maybe his mind had returned. But no one imagined the truth that the poorest girl in the village had given him her only hope, simply because she cared. The man who we now know was named Obina, sat behind the market that day, eating slowly. Each bite felt like a miracle. For the first time in years, his hands stopped shaking. Tears ran down his wrinkled face, not just from gratitude, but from the painful memories that food could never wash away. 15 years ago, Lagos Obina was once the CEO of a successful Obina was once the CEO of a successful textile company. He had money, respect, a family, a beautiful wife, and a son named Chuka, the apple of his eye. But Obina's life wasn't all perfect. Behind closed doors, enemies lurked. Jealous brothers, greedy cousins. Even his most trusted friend betrayed him. One night, after a business trip, Obina returned home to find the unimaginable. The company accounts wiped out. His properties had been forged and signed over. His signature forged. Police came knocking, and the worst blow. His wife. Convinced he had done it to himself, she took their son and left. Obina tried to fight, tried to prove his innocence. But in a world where the rich can fall faster than the poor rise, he was devoured. No one believed him. Homeless, shamed, sick. With grief, he wandered from city to city until he found himself in that small village, alone, lost and broken. But the day Amara gave him that envelope, something shifted. That night, as the moon rose over the trees and bats flew overhead, Obina sat beside the fire behind a mechanic's shed. He opened the envelope again, touching the money with trembling fingers. But what caught his eye was a note tucked inside. It read, "Dear God, please let this money give me a future. And if someone else needs it more than me, let it help them instead. Amara." He wept not because of the money, but because of the heart behind it. The same heart his own son once had before they were torn apart. For the first time in years, Obina stood tall. He would find a way back. He would find his son. He would thank this girl, who reminded him what it meant to be seen, to be human, far away in Lagos. Inside a glass skyscraper with tinted windows and air conditioning that whispered wealth, Chuka Obina sat behind his mahogany desk, 30 years old. Billionaire, entrepreneur, a man whose name was on magazines and lips across Africa, yet inside, something was missing. He had fame. He had power, but not peace. He never stopped wondering what had happened to his father. His mother had told him the story again and again. That man abandoned us, Chuka. He chose greed over his family. Forget him. But Chuka couldn't. He remembered being lifted on his father's shoulders. He remembered how his father taught him to tie his shoelaces and say thank you after every meal. And now, that boy had become a man haunted by questions back in the village. News of Amara's sacrifice had spread. The village chief called her a foolish girl with a bleeding heart. But old Mama Ngozi said, that girl carries the spirit of the ancestors. Mark my words, she will not end in shame. Amara had returned to her chores. She helped her aunt at the market. She swept the compound. But her eyes had changed. Some nights she would sit by the fire and wonder, did he use the money well? Was he okay? She never expected to see him again, but fate was preparing a stage. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled into the village square. Dust rose behind it as curious villagers peeked out of their huts. Out stepped a tall, well-dressed man in a sharp gray kaftan, sunglasses, polished shoes. He had come with his foundation to donate school supplies. The village children screamed in excitement. Amara watched from a distance, her hands dusty with yam flour, wondering who the important guest was. She had no idea that the man who had returned was the son of the beggar she had helped. And soon, the truth would begin to unfold. The village had never seen such a car. Its windows gleamed like mirrors. The tires crunched quietly on the reddish soil, and the black paint shone like a panther's back in sunlight. When the door opened and Chuka Obina stepped out, the entire market square fell into stunned silence. Women whispered. Children gawked. Even the men paused their games of draft and stared. Who was this city stranger with such power and grace? He was tall and confident, but humble. Not loud like the arrogant politicians who came every election season. He smiled. He greeted elders. He even bowed his head when old Mama Ngozi blessed him. I'm here on behalf of the Obina Foundation, he announced. We're supporting village schools across Nigeria. Your children matter. Your future matters. Cheers erupted. Mothers ululated. Children jumped and sang. But somewhere near the back of the crowd, half hidden in the shade of a mango tree, stood Amara. Her dress was plain, her hands stained from peeling yam. She said nothing, but her eyes were locked on the visitor, drawn by something she couldn't explain. There was something familiar in him. After the ceremony, the village elders invited Chuka to rest at the chief's compound. Palm wine was poured. Speeches were made. Drummers played softly under the trees, but Chuka's heart wasn't fully present as he watched. The children danced. His mind wandered. Something about this village stirred something inside him, a memory, a feeling, a shadow. Then one of his assistants, a local school inspector, walked up. Sir, you might want to meet one of the girls here. Her name is Amara. She couldn't go back to school because she gave her fees to a beggar. It's the talk of the village. Chuka's eyes narrowed. A beggar? He asked. Yes, sir. An old madman who sleeps under the baobab tree. But since that day, he cleaned up. People say he's changed. Some say he's not even mad anymore. Something about that made Chuka's heart skip a beat. That evening, Chuka asked to meet Amara. She came shyly, head bowed, her dress still dusty from working in the compound. She didn't know how to stand in front of such a powerful man. But Chuka smiled. You must be Amara. Yes, sir. You gave up your school fees for a stranger? She looked up, uncertain. Yes, he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Why would you do that? She hesitated, then answered quietly. Because I know what hunger feels like. And because someone helped me once, too. Chuka was silent. Then he asked the question that made the air still. Do you remember what he looked like? Amara nodded. Yes, thin, long beard. A deep scar on his left cheek. Chuka froze. Scar, left cheek. He fumbled into his inner pocket and pulled out an old photograph, torn and fading. In it, a younger Obina smiled beside a little boy. He showed it to Amara. Did he look like this? Her eyes widened. That's him. She gasped. That's the man I helped. Chuka stood still. The world spun. He clutched the photo, his breath shallow. He hadn't seen his father's face in 15 years. Now, this girl, this orphan, was telling him he'd been living in her village all this time. Chuka rose to his feet. Where is he now? He's been staying behind the mechanic's shop, eating from the church pot sometimes. He's different now. Quiet, I think. I think he remembers things. The sky turned orange as the sun began to dip behind the hills. Chuka, Amara, and 2 villagers walked down the narrow path toward the mechanic's shop. It smelled of iron, grease, and burnt rubber, and there, sitting on a wooden bench, peeling. Boiled corn was Obina. Older, weaker, but unmistakably the man from the photograph. Chuka stopped a few feet away, his entire body trembling. Papa. The old man looked up, his corn dropped, his eyes widened, searching, disbelieving. Chuka, he whispered, as though the name itself would vanish if said too loud. Tears poured down Chuka's face as he rushed forward and knelt beside us. Father, Papa, it's me. I thought you left us. Obina raised a shaky hand and cupped his son's cheek. No, my son. I was taken. Kay never stopped thinking of you. They embraced. Kay long. Fierce. The kind of embrace that heals broken years. Amara watched silently, her hand over her mouth, tears flowing. The beggar was a father, a giant, and her kindness had mended what the world had torn apart. That night, the stars above the village shone brighter than ever. The story of the reunion spread like wildfire, but more surprises lay ahead, because what Chuka did next would change Amara's life forever. The stars that night witnessed what even the sun had long forgotten, a lost father embraced by the son who had become a man. Tears washed away years of pain. Words long buried clawed their way out, and the hearts of villagers softened, even those who had called Obina mad. But it wasn't just an emotional reunion. No. It was the beginning of a story few would believe unless they saw it with their own eyes, in the quiet of the mechanic's shed. Chuka sat beside his father and listened. Obina's voice shook as he spoke, but he remembered everything. He told his son a betrayal of forged documents, of crooked family members, of a best friend who conspired with lawyers and swept his entire company away. He told him how he had begged for justice, only to be locked away in a psychiatric center for hallucinating. And then he told him how he escaped, how he roamed the country with no name, no ID, and no strength, until he ended up under the baobab tree in that little village. Chuka's fists clenched. How could they do this to you? Obina looked at him and smiled weakly. Because I trusted too easily, and they never thought I'd live long enough to tell my story. There was silence. Then Chuka rose to his feet. Papa, I will make this right. 3 days later, Chuka left the village. He went straight to Lagos, not to party, not to pose for magazine covers, but to dig. He hired private investigators. He gathered documents. He reopened the case. And in just weeks, the truth came, crashing down like a crumbling mansion. The family members who betrayed Obina were exposed. The former best friend, now a real estate developer, was dragged before the court, and the court, after years of silence, declared Obina innocent. All his assets were restored. But to Obina, it wasn't about money, it was about truth. It was about being seen again as a man, a father, a human being. The day Chuka returned, he didn't come alone. He came with journalists, with lawyers, with donations, and with one very special gift. The village square was packed. Drums echoed through the air. Children danced. Elders wore their finest wrappers. Amara stood in the crowd. Not knowing why she had been called to the front, Chuka stepped up to the podium. He wore a simple white agbada and a radiant smile. He turned to the crowd and said, "Today is not about me. It's not about my foundation. It's about a girl whose heart was richer than gold, a girl who gave away her future for a hungry man she didn't know. That man was my father." Gasps swept through the crowd. Mouths fell open. Some began to cry. Chuka turned to Amara, took her hand, and continued. She did what no rich person has ever done for him. She gave everything without expecting anything. And because of her, I found my father. Because of her, I got my family back. Because of her, this story changed. He paused, then smiled. Today, I'm proud to announce that Amara is receiving a full scholarship, not just for secondary school, but for university anywhere she wants in the world. The crowd erupted. Some people fainted from joy. Amara's knees buckled, and she began to cry. Not soft tears, but deep sobs from a place that had known too much sorrow. But Chuka wasn't done. He raised a second scroll. We are also building a new school right here in this village. It will be named the Amara Hope Academy so that her story will never be forgotten. Even the chief, who once called her foolish, bowed his head in shame. The weeks that followed felt like a dream. Amara began online classes with private tutors while waiting for her scholarship to activate. The school construction began, and villagers were employed as workers. Children who once roamed the streets now sang songs of learning and Obina. He stayed in the village with his son, often visiting, not as a billionaire, but as a son who found home one evening. Obina sat beside Amara under the baobab tree. "You remind me so much of my wife," he said softly. "Kind, brave, selfless." Amara smiled. She must have been wonderful. She was. But not half as wonderful as the daughter I never had until now. From that day, Amara became family. But perhaps the most powerful moment came months later, when the chief invited Amara to speak at the new school's opening. She stood on the same ground where she once walked with torn shoes and empty pockets. She wore a simple white dress and held a microphone in hands that once held nothing but hope. And she said, "I used to believe the world had forgotten people like me. But I learned that one act of kindness can shake the heavens. That even in hunger giving can open doors no key can. And that when we see people as people, not problems, we begin to heal." The crowd wept, and somewhere in the back, under the tree, Obina nodded. There's a saying among the elders, "The river that forgets its source shall one day run dry." But in this story, the source was remembered. Amara, the girl once called foolish. Amara, the orphan mocked for giving her future away. Amara, the one whose name no one once knew, was now a symbol across Nigeria. The Amara Hope Academy had opened its doors. Children lined up each morning with fresh uniforms, eager minds, and laughter that echoed down the dusty paths of the village. The walls of the school bore her name. The flag fluttered with her story. And at the center of the courtyard stood a statue, not of a king or warrior, but of a young girl handing an envelope to a seated old man. A daily reminder that kindness changes everything. Though Chuka returned to Lagos to continue his work and philanthropy, he never let Amara out of his sight. He made her his foundation's youth ambassador. He helped her publish her own children's book, The Baobab Gift, a story inspired by her act. It was translated into 12 languages and read in schools across Africa one evening. During a televised interview, Chuka was asked, "With all your wealth and fame, what is the greatest investment you've ever made?" He smiled and answered, "A girl named Amara. She gave away what little she had. In return, she changed 3 lives, mine, my father's, and her own." Obinai, once forgotten, cast aside, spent his final years in the village, where he was honored, respected, and loved. He volunteered at the school. He told stories to the children under the same baobab tree where he once begged. When he passed away peacefully one morning, Mara sat by his side, holding his hand. She whispered, "Rest now, Papa. You are home." He was buried beside the school under a mango tree, where students still gather to read his favorite proverbs. His gravestone read, "Once called mad, once called lost, now remembered forever. As a father, a teacher, and a miracle." With her scholarship fully funded, Amara flew to South Africa to study education and social work. She returned each summer to teach holiday classes to village children. She helped build libraries in rural towns, and one day she founded her own global nonprofit, Kind Roots, dedicated to empowering orphans through education and storytelling. At international conferences, she was introduced not just as Amara from Nigeria, but as the girl who changed a billionaire's heart. And so, under the same sky where she once cried herself to sleep, Amara now stood tall, proud, and glowing. She walked past the tree where she met Obina. She paused. She smiled, and she whispered, "Mama, I didn't go to school that day, but I still found my purpose." The wind rustled the leaves as if the heavens replied, "Because sometimes we lose one thing to gain everything." So, dear listener, what would you do if you had only one chance and someone needed it more? Would you give? Would you walk away? Or would you risk everything to light a stranger's dark world? Because sometimes the person you save might one day return to save you. Never underestimate the power of kindness. Not just the big, public kind, but the quiet, selfless kind. The kind that echoes for generations. The kind that writes legends. Like this one. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy. Goodbye.